Greetings, metaphysicians. This is episode 112, Education of the Soul. That's what came through today. We don't talk about the soul or the spirit or source or consciousness in traditional education on this planet. And I think we should. So take a listen to the episode and we'll see what you think about it. Enjoy.
You're listening to Let's Get Metaphysical. This podcast explores the spiritual and metaphysical world through the experiences and opinions of the host and those interviewed. It should not necessarily be seen as direct endorsement or personal advice to our listeners. We encourage you to use your own discernment, judgment, and intuition regarding anything you learn from this show.
Let's get meta.
Welcome to the Let's Get Metaphysical podcast. I'm your host, Renata Maniaci, here to remind you that you are a spiritual being having a temporary human experience here on lovely planet Earth. Could have been another planet, could have been another solar system, could have been another galaxy, or universe, or multiverse, but you're here in this far corner of this galaxy, in this solar system, here on planet Earth. Make the most of it. And today, what is coming through is my angels are dropping the word education into my mind a lot lately, and I've been thinking about it, and how our education system is completely devoid of soul, or spirit, or spiritual topics, or those topics that we most actually want to learn about, why we are here, who we really are, where we came from, what our path should be. These are the things that make us up that we don't actually even mention in any formal education, in most formal education on this planet. What about consciousness? Where is the talk about how we evolve, how we better ourselves? Not just our minds, but our spirits, our souls. We don't talk about consciousness at all. And so without further ado, let's see what the angels have to drop in about this. Are you ready? Let's get meta. Masters and angels, I request your presence, assistance, guidance, and support for this episode. I invoke the light of the divine within me. I am a clear and perfect channel. Light is my guide, highest possible good, and only good is allowed. Please let me know the truth, speak the truth, become the truth, and be the truth. And let this episode reach whoever needs to hear it. Thank you with gratitude and full faith. Bless creation. Let's talk about education. It's been on my mind. It's coming through the last few days. And I have a big, long history with education and a lot of feelings about it. I have had almost every type of education possible. And what I mean by that is fairly conventional types of education, but ones that we would encounter most of the world over, unless you are living in very remote parts of Africa, South America, indigenous places. Most education around the planet looks pretty much the same. The conditions may be different, the state of the schools may be different, but it looks fairly similar around the globe. We learn basics, reading, writing, math, and those are pretty standard in every country around the world. I have had a lot of different flavors of education, starting with Montessori school, then Catholic school, then public school, then private university, then international school in 2 different countries, and then Ivy League school, and then massage school and energy medicine school. And that's a lot of different paradigms, a couple different approaches, definitely different feels. And as I've grown in my spiritual life, it's hard not to notice that this piece of my journey that has become so large in my everyday experience was basically completely absent in my entire educational career from day one all the way up through pretty much energy medicine school. That was the only place that even talked about the soul, the spirit, your energy body, and even broached the idea that this human vehicle might not be all there is. And I have to credit my international schools, School for International Training, that was what it's called, SIT, because at least while I was abroad, specifically in Senegal, West Africa, I was so thrown out of my comfort zone that I was in the right kind of space to have an incredibly mind-blowing spiritual experience during the course of that program, even though at that time I didn't even have the language to call it a spiritual experience. I remember it being incredibly mind-blowing, deep. I felt things that I'd never felt in my whole life throughout that trip, but also at a specific moment where everything just kind of blended in together. And I had this oneness moment that people hear about. Sometimes you may have heard this moment, or you may have had this moment. And it was so humbling. I don't even think I knew what humbling meant before I felt that feeling. And it came completely out of nowhere. I mean, on, a micro level, it came completely out of nowhere. On a macro level, I'm sure that it was being arranged and that was going to happen at that moment, no matter what. At least that's what I feel now. But I had been through, I'm just thinking here, 12, 16, 18, 19, 20, let's just say 20 plus years of school, of formal education. And nowhere was the idea that I was more than my physical body, or that there was more beyond this planet in a very real way, or more beyond this lifetime even considered, not even considered. And I'm not saying this is necessarily how it is in every place around the world. Different religious practices believe in reincarnation, and I'm sure you might get that through that kind of arena. Maybe not in formal school, but maybe if you happen to be part of a religious practice or other kind of spiritual practice through your parents, maybe through your community, maybe you are someone who actually did have some kind of spiritual education. But it occurs to me that this is a huge hole, a huge gap in our education as a temporarily human being on this planet. And that matters even if you are one of those who do believe that this is your only lifetime. I think that spiritual education about your soul, your spirit, your spirituality, is vitally important and should be at least acknowledged, at least explored, at least mentioned, at least given some form of space and time for questioning and exploring different possibilities from 0 through, pre-K through whatever, all of it. Why? Some people would hear this and me saying this and say, yeah, but there's separation between church and state. Okay. I'm not talking about church. I'm not talking about temples. I'm not talking about shrines or religion or dogma. In fact, I'm not talking about any kind of dogma at all. What do I mean by dogma? Different religions have different rules, rituals, practices that were all constructed and formed by humans. They're literally human constructs. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And I appreciate when education does bring in some form of study of religion, if not just to broaden one's experience and see, oh, well, these people do it this way, these people do it that way. I am a true anthropologist at heart. It's what I studied in undergrad, and I absolutely love it still because it's a study of culture. It's a study of people and traditions. And I love that. And it's important. And I know that we can't study everything. There's not time to study everything. But how did we get to only prioritizing reading, writing, and arithmetic, generally speaking? Of course, we have all the other things. But how did those other things even get chosen? History, statistics, language arts, geography, science, languages, home economics, physical education. What about emotional education or spiritual education? How did we come to decide as a society to not even mention anything about the soul, the spirit, the potential for there to be something bigger that is running this whole show, even talking about it? See, I don't see a discussion or room for spiritual discussions as religion. I don't. I don't advocate for something that would fall into the category of a specific religion or set of rules or set of beliefs being taught in an educational institution, unless that is what the educational institution is literally made from. Spirituality is more universal than that. We are more universal than we are allowed to believe that we are. I'm talking about exploring universal laws. What is true here on this planet and what is true on a different planet? If truth is truth, it's true here and it's true everywhere, not just in one place. And if it's not, then it's a human construct. It's something that works for this time and space, but actually it doesn't work over in that country in that time and space. So it's not true. It's not universally true. Maybe these concepts seem a little too big for kindergartners or things like this, but many of you listening know that children under the age of 5, 6 that have not gone to school yet, high percentages of them have seen or can see what could be called angels, what could be called invisible friends, what could be called guides, or just beings that exist in a level, in a frequency that they are still able to see because no one has told them that they don't exist yet. Or nobody has just completely ignored them and never spoken of them yet, because they're still there, they're still visible to these young people, these children. What if we talked about that? What if we acknowledged that this is a phenomenon, we would call it a phenomenon as adults, that is just a common thing the world over with young children? And what if we actually asked about that and made space for that reality, and made space and time to even simply ask questions? Just asking questions without even necessarily having a specific curriculum and a specific answer for these open-ended questions about where we come from. Is there a soul? Was there life before this life? Where do we go once this body dies? Is there other things happening in other planets? Are there other civilizations in our galaxy, in other galaxies, in our solar system, in other solar systems? Has anyone had a memory of something that didn't happen in this lifetime, but you still have the memory? These, I would argue, are really important. This whole arena is an important cadre of some kind of necessity of our human experience here on the planet that isn't even mentioned in formal education. And I think that I've had enough time outside of my formal education, my 20 plus years in various institutions and universities and all kinds of experiences within Earth education. I've had enough distance now and enough balance, let's say, with the spiritual aspect, the very real, realistic, tangible spiritual aspect of my life and our lives here on this planet, that I have had enough space that I can now look back at education, all the forms of education that I've had, of which there were many, and see this huge, gaping hole where the soul could be, and where just thoughtful, deep questions about our very existence could be, but aren't. And I'm not stupid. I understand probably why this has never come in on many levels. But I'm at this point now where I'm very highly educated in Earth terms and fairly highly educated in spiritual terms, I would say. And I don't see these two things as needing to be separate moving forward. In fact, I think it is highly detrimental to our whole humanity that they are separate and that they're not incorporated in an integrative, thoughtful, even just open-ended questioning type of way in any kind of formal education environment. Even in Montessori, even in Waldorf, even in these types of more open-minded, we could say, or different ways to approach learning. And I hold those two types of learning very highly. I'm familiar with both of them. And I mentioned Catholic school. I was in Catholic school for 3.5 years before I asked my mom to put me in public school. And even there, it's, I don't advocate, it's religious, right? It's a very specific set of beliefs, of which there is some truth There's some truth in Catholicism, just like there is some truth in most every religion. Some truth, a piece. I don't feel like any religion has the full puzzle yet, because it is inherently flawed by human constructs and human beliefs. It's not wrong. It's not bad necessarily. It's just not complete truth. Little pieces of truth. So why can't we have space in the curriculum, in every curriculum, starting from pre-K? I think we will know how to explain some of these more supernatural or metaphysical experiences someday, because I believe that at the end point, spirituality and science meet. They meet, and they both are true and make sense together. And I think that we're heading in that direction, but we're not there yet. And so in the meantime, why not have a space set aside that just includes this grab bag of potential experiences that these kids and these youth and these adults are having? They're having them. People see things. People hear things that no one else can hear. People have experiences that they cannot explain but are no less real just because they can't explain them. People have memories from past lives. People know things without knowing how they know things. People have seen what we would call aliens or extraterrestrials or UFOs or angels, or they don't know what to call them. They saw something, but they don't know what it is because we don't have a word for that. All of these experiences that I've talked about on this podcast for the last 4.5 years are real, even if they can't be explained. And so why are they sidelined into these pigeonholed areas of New Age and spirituality and fringe ideas? These are not fringe. The experience of having a loved one pass and having a visitation in a dream, or a message while waking that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt happened and was true because you felt it on this level that you cannot explain with words, but it happened. Almost everyone on the planet has had one of the experiences that I've just mentioned. Almost everyone. But we don't have any formal way or space to acknowledge them and to just openly be able to talk about and ask questions without necessarily needing to have the answers. And aren't the best courses, aren't the best classes, aren't the best education systems places where we can ask questions without necessarily having an answer? Where we can develop our own critical thinking, discover our own voice, discover our own truths, and share those truths with an unjudgmental ear listening. This is a huge gap. This is a void that I think it's time that we start to fill in a thoughtful and open way. Not in a religious way. Not in a dogmatic way. You know, interestingly, maybe the closest thing would be something that we don't even reach until college. Almost in a philosophical way. Almost. It's different, but almost in a philosophical way. And you don't see philosophy classes in grade school or high school. This would be a whole new genre, a whole new area, a whole new elective. And hopefully, I wouldn't want it to be an elective. I would want it to be core, just as important as English, just as important as reading, just as important as writing. just as important as math, just as important as science, true science. This would be true spirituality. And just like we don't have all the answers in science yet, and we sure don't, we don't have all the answers to whatever we would call this spirituality aspect of education. And that's okay. But as I say at the beginning of every episode, here to remind you that we are spiritual beings having a temporary human experience here on lovely planet Earth. This is what I wish could be incorporated alongside our existing education program, not just in the United States, but throughout the world, so that we can become not just global citizens, global, thoughtful, compassionate citizens, but that we could one day actually be universal citizens. Because it's almost inevitable that there is other life. There are other planets. There are other civilizations. There are other beings. There are other races. More advanced, less advanced, higher consciousness, lower consciousness. And so even giving us the space to focus, to broaden our focus just enough so that we're slightly open to everything else that could exist in creation, as though we didn't only think that this is the only possible thing going on in the whole vast universe. I think that would help all of us, not just with our own soul's journey, because it's a journey. I think it would help us to be better in this lifetime with each other. Having this perspective, having this level of consciousness. Consciousness. We don't even look at consciousness in education, but we should be. Our levels of consciousness, they can go up and they can go down, and we don't even strive to bring them up formally in our education system. Yet. Talk about intelligence. Our intelligence can go up, that's for sure. I didn't mention our mental education, because all of education is mental education already. Our spiritual education, our consciousness, our levels of consciousness, our education in consciousness, where is it? So those are the thoughts I wanted to put forward today. I hope that you enjoy them, and I don't have a specific bonus content for this topic, but I did have a very powerful clearing session yesterday with my online community for the lunar full moon eclipse that happened on November 8th. So I'm going to make that available to everyone for the bonus content for this episode because it was that powerful. So you can enjoy that at patreon.com/letsgetmeta. Thank you for listening. Stay positive, stay safe, and stay meta.
The Let's Get Metaphysical podcast is an Up and Awaken production and is produced and hosted by Renata Maniaci. Our intention is to raise the vibration of the planet by sharing, validating, and normalizing spiritual and metaphysical experiences. If you are ready to raise your vibration, you might enjoy our free Let's Get Meta Master Clearing. To receive the Master Clearing or to learn more about the podcast, visit letsgetmeta.com. We like to share metaphysical stories and answer spiritual questions on the podcast. If you have a metaphysical experience you would like to share or have a spiritual question you would like to have answered, please send an email to info@letsgetmeta.com. The Let's Get Meta podcast is inspired by angels and supported by angels. If you would like to be an angel donor to the podcast, visit patreon.com/letsgetmeta. Thank you for listening. Stay meta.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.